This podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional, medical, or any other type of advice. As a listener, you must use your own judgment and interpretation when applying the content of this podcast. Hey, welcome to Boldly Authentic with Cynthiafontaine. I am Cynthiafontaine, and I am thrilled to be here with you today, wherever in the world you are listening. This is episode 5 of my latest podcast, and I wanted just to take a quick look back to episode 4, just as a really quick recap. And if you haven't listened to episode 4 yet, I would love for you to go back and take a listen to it. I'm working through sort of a series of shows that build on one on top of each other in this first series of Boldly Authentic. The last episode, I talked about intuition and psychic and how that information comes in through your chakras. And intuition comes through chakras 1, 2, and 3. And psychic information comes in through chakras 5, 6, and 7. They meet in the heart and blend together, giving you more information rather than just what we absorb and get through our physical body, if you will. So chakra 1 is the root chakra, the base chakra, and that is located where you sit down, basically. Chakra 2 is just about 2 inches below the belly button. Chakra 3 is just above the belly button. Chakra 4 is the heart area. Chakra 5 is the throat. Chakra 6 is the forehead, between, just slightly above and between your eyes, your eyebrows. Chakra 7, the crown of your head. And so when you combine and bring in information from source, you will hear me use the word source throughout this series. You might hear me say source. You might hear me say the divine. You might hear me say the big G word, God, because I was raised Catholic and I still cherish many things about religious background. My spiritual background is different than religion, and just want to put that out there. It might be important for some of you to know, sort of what my foundation is or has been. The channels in which you are able to bring this information in, whether it's the intuition, which is built in. You don't really have to work at intuition, although for people who are really left-brained, people who are very linear thinkers, people who are maybe mechanical, people who are very organized, people who really use that side of their brain, sometimes can have a more difficult time allowing their intuition to come in. And actually, sometimes they don't even recognize that it's intuition. Same thing with the psychic senses come in. I've said for a long time that our intuitive and psychic senses are our 5 senses on hyperdrive, or our 6 senses on hyperdrive, because the third eye is really the first sense. It's our seeing and connection to higher levels of understanding. We also, in the episode 4, talked about clearing your channels and raising your vibration, and how you do that. There's a bunch of different ways that you can do it. Getting out in nature and taking salt baths are my number 1 and number 2, and they switch around. Sometimes salt baths are number 1, and sometimes getting outside is number 1. That's super, super important for me. Even when it's not so great weather out, whether it's cold and raining or snowing or whatever, I still like to get outside. And if it's really bad, I'll just sit on the porch, which is covered over, which is kind of nice, just so I can get my outdoor time. I really, really, really value that. And then there's the profiles. You will hear me talk about the profiles a lot. And the reason is all the many, many things that I've studied, the modalities that I have studied, I have found the profiles to be one of the most valuable things in the work that I do with all of you. And if you haven't experienced working with me yet, I really encourage you to come on and check me out, whether you catch me on Clubhouse or at a live event or in a Zoom event, or book a private session. I have lots of material and years under my belt and a lot of different modalities that I can tap into in order to help in things that are going on in your life. So the profiles, if you want to really dive deep in the profiles, I recommend you go to my website and click on the link for the book, Discover Your Purpose, The Life Purpose Profiles by Reese Thomas. And that will take you right to the Amazon page. You can put that book in your cart and check it out. I really recommend that if you want to really understand the profiles, I would recommend that you get that book. I did 3 years at the Reese Thomas Institute of Energy Medicine and chose as my major, if you will, what my focus of graduate work would be in that program was the personality profiles. And the last I knew, there were only actually 4 of us certified in the whole world in Reese's system. I don't know if that's still true. I probably should check with him at some point, although I don't know that it's really that important. There's lots of profiling systems out there. There's the Enneagram, there's human design, there's many different ways that people have discovered to figure out who you are, right? What your personality profile is. And I actually have a master program that is called Your Secret Life Code. One of the big pieces in that is your profile. And I actually profile you in the work, because when you know what your true profile is, most of us, 99% of us, live through our secondary profile rather than our primary profile, which is the profile we really came here to live through, because that profile is what is going to help us live our life on purpose and be on purpose in our lives. I can give you an example in my own life, and you can actually go on Reese's website. I think right now it's 4dhealing.com, and take the profile assessment. And it's really interesting because the first time I took the assessment, I came out as an emotional intelligence specialist as my primary profile. Well, when you take the profile test before you go through a program like that or do a lot of personal development work and really get to know who you are at your core, the test comes out showing your secondary profile, or this profile that you're living through. What's interesting in my case is emotional intelligence specialist is not my secondary profile. In fact, it's my least, it's what I have the least of. But that's how I lived. That's how I survived in my life. That's how I stayed safe, was I just loved everyone. It cost me a lot of pain and grief, because I knew as a kid that I was meant to do something in the world. If you're listening to this show, you probably have felt the same at some point in your life, and especially maybe when you were a child. And, I always knew that I was going to be a teacher, although I thought I was going to teach kindergarten or something. Well, I tried that. It definitely was not for me. And man, love those teachers out there, because it is a tough job, and it's tougher than ever before in all of history. So I didn't know, what kind of a teacher I was going to be. I just knew I was going to be a teacher. But I thought kindergarten, because I just wanted to love everybody. And it was interesting. A couple of people in my life, starting with, I would say, probably my 8th grade gym teacher, saw something in me, and she encouraged me to learn gymnastics and try out for the gymnastics team the following year in high school. A lot of people start gymnastics when they're 5 or 6 years old. And here I was going into my first year of high school, never had a gymnastics lesson, never had gone to gymnastics classes or practice. But I thought, I'm going to try it. And so I did. And I was on the team for a season and a half. And I didn't finish the second season because I walked back and forth to practice. And it was a little bit over 3 miles one way. And gymnastics was in the winter. And this one night when we had practice, there was a lot of snow. I got about 2 miles from my house when somebody I knew passed me on the road and said, "Oh, where are you going?" And I told them, and I get to the gym and practice had been called off. And then I had to walk back home. Thought, I just can't keep doing this. So I stopped going to gymnastics, and that was really a big deal for me to stop going to gymnastics. But it was tough walking those 3-point-some miles each way and 2 hours of gymnastics practice and walking home in the dark as a 14-year-old or 15-year-old. Anyway, the next person who saw my light was my union president. So I delivered mail for 26 years. And I was only at the post office for maybe 6 months when the union president came to me and he said, "I want you to be a shop steward." And I said, "Me? Why?" I didn't see myself as being able to do that or have what it takes to be a shop steward, because, you have to do things like sometimes the postal inspectors would come in and you would have to represent people who with the postal inspectors took into the office. But he saw something in me as a leader. And I was shop steward for 25 of the 26 years that I worked for the post office for. I actually became the senior steward. I had several offices that I took care of. I did a lot within the state itself. And still, though, I didn't see myself as a leader. Why? Because I was living in team player at that point, which is my secondary profile. So at least I had moved up from emotional intelligence specialist to team player, because emotional intelligence specialist for me is at the bottom of what the profiles I actually have. But team player at least is second. So I was living through my secondary profile and doing it for the team, right? We would be in the office a couple of nights a week on Sundays, and it was this team thing. And still, I was getting value out of it, and I helped a lot of my coworkers. But I still was not coming from my true profile in that position even. So I appreciated, though, that he saw the leader within me. I just didn't know how to step out of team playing and into really being a leader. It wasn't until my life really kind of fell apart. It was one of those times when so many things happened, and I was really going through a difficult time on many levels. Career-wise, I had an accident. My brother had passed away, and he had completed suicide, and I had lost my house. The spiritual group that I had studied with for many years came to a close, and so my whole life turned upside down. And I went to this seminar one weekend. This woman I had been following for quite a number of years. In fact, she had offered me a job when she was just starting out. And she did tapping, EFT. And I had been to her weekends before. And even though all the time I was working at the post office, I was always learning new things on the holistic sort of side of things, whether it was tapping, EFT, or Reiki, or angel healing, or learning how to read oracle cards. I love to learn. In fact, one of my friends was here a couple of days ago in my office, and she's looking around and she says, "Wow, you've taken a lot of classes, haven't you?" And I had to laugh. I had to look around myself, and I'm looking at my bookcases, and I'm going, "Wow, I guess I have." Many, many, many years ago, one of my daughter's riding instructors, she rode horses. She's done a number of different types of riding, from hunter jumper to dressage to polo. So one of her early trainers always said to her, pay attention to detail and always learn from somebody who is still learning. So always make sure that you are with a teacher who is still learning new things. And I really took that to heart. It really became part of my mission, if you will, to be learning new things all the time. I do take breaks. I'm not in classes 365 days a year, 7 days a week, but I do like to study. So during that time, the proverbial shit hit the fan, I turned to studying. So I was at this 3-day event, and this person kept talking about these profiles and how they worked with the chakras and everything. And I said, oh my goodness, I need to know more about that. That's the missing piece to everything. That's the missing piece to literally everything. And I was so excited about it. So I had to find out whose work it was. And it turned out to be the facilitator's former husband's work. And I had actually been following, this is Reese, and I had actually been following Reese for a number of years, but I didn't really seem to connect with him. But once I got a taste of the profile system, I knew I had to study that. And so he had a 3-day event a few weeks later. I went to the 3-day event, and as they say, that was the end of the story. Sat in the front row, signed up for school, and did the master level. And 3 years later, graduated with certifications. That's not the important piece. The important piece is the value that brought me in my own life. And now I'm able to bring that value out to you. And when we really know who we are, it can change everything. When we are actually living in our primary profile, it makes a huge difference in our lives and in our loved ones' lives around us. And there's some really quick ways that you can sort of, by visually looking at a person, get a clue about what their profile might be. And it can really be good information. So go get the book. You can read more about it, and then we can talk about that more later on at another time or in a class. Or again, you can book a session with me if you want to know more about that as well. So here's a couple of quick things that could help you get started thinking about what your profile might be, and also think about the people around you, what their profiles might be. Now, you probably are a charismatic leader if you got into fights when you were younger, as a kid growing up, as a teenager. That is a characteristic of a charismatic leader. One in defense, and of course, when we're growing up, we're usually often in defense. If you're a team player, you probably wanted to do what everybody else was doing. It didn't matter when you were growing up what game everybody was playing. It didn't matter what movie you were watching. You just wanted to be part of the group. Now, if you're a creative idealist, you may have, let's just say, had your head in the clouds. And maybe you heard your parents say, "Where are you? What are you thinking about? How come you're never paying attention?" You might be a creative idealist. And notice, if you go back and look at pictures, notice, is your head upright or is it always tilted in pictures? Because creative idealists, you will see when you look at pictures of people and their head is tilted in all the pictures you look at, that's a telltale sign that they are a creative idealist. Now, creative idealists are super smart, where they're the people who get the A pluses in school and they don't really study. Now, knowledgeable achievers are a good, solid A student, but they study hard to get that A. Knowledgeable achievers want to master things. They want to know everything about a subject, and no stone goes unturned when a knowledgeable achiever gets on a subject. They are people that will have PhDs or multiple degrees, and they are excellent, become excellent in whatever study they decide to hone in on. Charismatic leader is going to be good at a lot of things, but they typically are not going to want to put the effort that it would take, the concentration and the work that it would take into mastering something. And it's a natural thing, and it's a good thing that we have all these different profiles, because a charismatic leader, what do they say? It's a jack of all trade and a master of none. That's the saying that my dad used to say. And my dad was a jack of all trades. He could do just about anything, whether it was mechanics or electrical, he could fix everything. He was a fabulous carpenter. He made beautiful furniture. He did a lot of things, and he did it well. Charismatic leaders often have a lot of different interests. They get bored with focusing on one thing. You might have a stack of books on your nightstand if you're a charismatic leader, with bookmarks in them all, because you are what I call a stack reader. You will read some of one book, and then, you're going to want to switch to a different book, and then maybe another book, and then eventually go back to the first book. It's an interesting way to read books. It's the way I read books mostly. I like new things, and I like things to be fresh and changing all the time. That's a charismatic leader trait. Let's see, who am I missing here? Oh, the emotional intelligence specialist. The emotional intelligence specialists are the ones that when they find the bunny rabbit, they're going to bring it in and they're going to want to take care of the bunny rabbit. They're going to want to feed it and take care of it and nurture it. And they're the ones that when their friend gets hurt, maybe they hold their hand or they kiss their boo-boo. That's the emotional intelligence specialist. And when the emotional intelligence specialist grows up, they're the ones that are baking cookies. They're the ones that are bringing things to their neighbors when they move in. I mean, any profile can do that, but they're soft. They tend to be very soft, and you can feel the kindness from them. My daughter's grandmother is a high-level emotional intelligence specialist, and she's very low-key. She watched all the grandkids while we all worked, and she would rub their heads and give them a shoulder rub if they had a bad day at school or something like that, and cook them their favorite dinners. And that's an emotional intelligence specialist. In the descriptions that I've given, do you see yourself anywhere in those yet? And that's just a small, tiny snippet. Why I feel so strongly that knowing who you really are, who you came on this planet to be is so important is because that's when you will find your center and find real happiness. You can have great things in your life, but you might find that when you're living in your secondary profile or a defensive profile, you really aren't that happy. This is why I incorporate the profiles into my work with everybody that I work with. Hollywood is an interesting place to start looking at and figuring out profiles, personality profiles. So every actor is a charismatic leader primary, but the roles that they play will be their secondary profile. Another reason why I feel the profiles and knowing your profile is so important to intuition and your psychic development is because it's going to give you a clear understanding of what clairs will be most likely the easiest ones for you to start to develop. So, for example, if you are a knowledgeable achiever, you are going to most likely have a knowing. You'll just know things. You won't know how you know it. You'll just know it. If you are a creative idealist, you won't even realize that you're knowing things. Things will just flow out of your mouth that aren't yours, that just got dropped in, and you don't even realize that you are channeling something higher. Charismatic leader can dip into all the clairs, but the one that you will first lean into that I suggest you check out is based on what your secondary profile is. So if you are if you're a secondary knowledgeable achiever, you're also going to have the knowing. In fact, one of my students right now is a charismatic leader team player, but she lives a lot in knowledgeable achiever. And she gets the knowing. She doesn't know how she knows. She just knows. Charismatic leaders are often the ones who have the clear vision. They see the clairvoyance. The emotional intelligence specialist will have the feels. They'll be the empaths and they'll feel things. They'll sense things. You might be good at psychometry or looking at a picture and be able to do a reading just from having a picture of someone because you'll feel the energy. Charismatic leaders are also going to be the ones who are more likely to have the mediumship capability. So every medium is psychic, but not every psychic is a medium. With mediumship, you are actually channeling people from the other side. There is differences even in mediumship when you get into things like trance channeling. There are a couple of people that you might be familiar with who do what I would say is trance channeling, and that would be Esther Hicks. She channels Abraham, and also the woman who channels Seth. And there's Sheila Gillette who channels Theo. Those are some good examples of people who trance channel. You can look them up on YouTube. They've got lots of videos out there if you're not familiar with trance channeling or Abraham or Theo or Seth. I don't know if Seth has a lot of videos out there, but Theo and Abraham, there are definitely a lot of videos on YouTube of them out there. You don't have to be a professional psychic or a medium or a trance channel to be able to use your intuition and your psychic abilities to help yourself in your life and to help other people. We have had some brilliant people who have walked the face of the earth who had to have been tapped into something bigger than them to bring in the things that they brought in. If you would like to go and look for someone on YouTube to experience seeing someone who is so connected in, it's this beautiful young woman whose name is Alma Deutscher, and she is a composer who I think is about 17 now, but she composed her first opera at like 7 years old. When you go and look at her videos, watch her face. She is totally embodied in the music, and you can see that she is channeling this gorgeous, incredible, complex music that she is playing. I think she's a wonderful example for you to go check out. So in circling back and tying things up for today's show, I encourage you to go take the profile test on 4dhealing.com, or you can Google Reese Thomas, the Reese Thomas Institute. It should come up. And let me know what your profile test shows and how you feel about that. I'm really curious. And so when this podcast airs, let me know in the comments and on my social media what your profile test came out to be. And I love talking about the profiles and how it relates to your intuition and your psychic development and so forth. And so I really look forward to hearing from some of you on this subject and on anything woo. That's all for today, folks. I hope you have enjoyed the show, and I really look forward to being back here with you next week. In the meantime, check out my social media. Please like and follow. Also, download the Clubhouse app if you haven't yet. And then find me on Clubhouse. I am listed as Cynthia Psychic. My house that I'm building is, it sounds kind of funny, but you actually do build houses in Clubhouse. And what that means is you're building a community. The community that I'm building is called All Things Psychic. I would love to see you there. And the great thing about Clubhouse is you can actually talk to me. There's nowhere else you have that opportunity to speak to me live in real time unless you book a session with me or you come to one of my events. So if you would like to know about my events and what's going on in my world, sign up for my newsletter. Go to Cynthiafontaine.com. Or if you are on Instagram, you can go to my bio and the link tree. All my social media is connected there. All right, everyone. Thanks again so much. I will see you soon somewhere in the universe. Be well, be safe, and take good care now.
This podcast was produced by Alchemy of the Earth Inc. at Cynthiafontaine.com. Producer Elise Spizak, Media Relations LJ Rank, Director Ryan Fontaine, and Sound Engineer David Breton. Please subscribe to patreon.com/boldlyauthentic for exclusive membership bonuses.